your book, you're talking about like the moment with Cliff when Cliff passed away, and you kind of shared that moment with them. I guess what do you think? What do you think Cliff brought to music that no one else did?
Well, he was the best musician out of all of us. Certainly, he knew more about music. He knew theory. He knew about melody. Like he was just a much more accomplished musician than anyone else at that point. So that has so much to do with their growth as a band and songwriters. I think on those first three records, if you go from Kill 'Em All to Master of Puppets, and the leaps they were making, from Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning to Master. I think it's just Cliff's. It was Cliff's ability, and to when it came to arranging and putting their songs together. James may have been writing most of the riffs, but Cliff had this sensibility that nobody else had when it came to melody and harmony, and you just hear it. You hear it on those records,
Yeah.
especially Master of Puppets. The Master of Puppets record is Cliff's. Fingerprints are all over that thing.
Your younger brother's Pantera. Do you have any great dime stories? Because everyone has great dime stories.
He's everything you wanted him to be, and more. Whether you were someone like me who was lucky enough to have known him for a really long time, from we met in '86.
Whoa.
Pantera was opening for us at some club in Houston, and so whether you're someone like me who knew him for a long time and got to spend even a lot of quiet time with him, and but he's but then at the same time, when he would walk off that tour bus, he he would give the people what they wanted. People. I think people have an expectation based on the albums and the home videos and who Darrell was, and he was that guy, 100%. And when he was out there, he would never let somebody down. Uh, Dime was truly just a one of a kind.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Revolver Fan First podcast. I'm your host, Christina Rowett, and joining me is an icon of the game. Let's be real. Heavy metal would not be the same. Let's look. I'm gassing you up, but it's true. Scott Ian. So how are you today?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good. So the first question we ask everyone is, who was the first artist you put on a pedestal?
Wow. Probably Elton John. I
Yeah.
think he was kind of the first music that I kind of really got into. Just from hearing it on the radio as a kid, and then I would ask my parents to take me to the record store, and I would buy the 7 inches, and sometimes they would buy me an album. But yeah, I spent a lot of time listening to Elton John, like talking like 1973, 74, in the basement of our house. Yeah, I was way, way, way into Elton John, so probably him.
And you wrote a lot of lyrics. You wrote lyrics for singers, same as Bernie. Like
True, yeah. Not to compare myself to Bernie Taupin, but yes, yeah. I don't know if my love of Elton John and Bernie Taupin has anything to do with the fact that I became a lyricist for Anthrax. That was more of a case of we needed someone to write lyrics, and I'm the only one who put my hand up.
well, he was the right guy for the job too. What did
Right.
you learn about like lyrics and melody from him?
I can't say I learned anything.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Anthrax is a
Um,
different game. Anthrax is a different game.
yeah,
That's a
yeah.
moment
I
in
mean,
childhood, I guess, before you. I mean, Kiss was the thing that made you want to be a musician, right?
yeah. I mean, I wasn't. I can't say that I was so much deeply paying attention to Bernie Taupin's lyrics when I was 9 or 10. Like I just loved the songs. And I'd sing along to a chorus and stuff, but I didn't know what the fuck Elton John was singing about or saying. I mean, uh, of course, years later when I got older, and then I really listened to albums, or songs like Madman Across the Water and Leave On and whatever. Yeah, yeah, you find a much bigger appreciation for the poetry of the lyrics. But I certainly was never a lyricist in that same kind of a style. I've tried my hand at that a few times, maybe writing a story or, or just taking poetic license. And
Mm.
maybe it only even makes sense to me, and other people will just be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But that's what's great about art, right? So, yeah, I can't say that there was any obvious influence that I could speak on, but of course, I was heavily into Elton John, and I still am. I mean, I've been a
Yeah.
fan essentially my whole life of liking music. So, um, some way, shape, or form, it must have informed me in some way.
Yeah, well, I mean, this show's about your history as a fan, so that's an important point. And not to get stuck on Elton John with the heavy metal dude, but like, what's a
Sure,
lyric
sure.
that you're really proud of, and what's a lyric that people didn't get and kind of got mad at you for?
In Anthrax?
Yeah, I mean,
Oh God.
S.O.D probably people got real mad.
Well, only stupid people got mad. um, because if you got mad at that record, that to me that immediately means you have zero sense of humor, and yeah, and you're dumb because I don't need to explain a
No,
record from 1985,
no.
nor mine or Danny Lilker's senses of humor. Um, but yeah, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, Surprisingly, most people got that.
yeah. That's
Most
sick.
people got it because even back in the day when the obvious, because it's the album title, "Speak English or Die," and people were like, "What do you mean by that?" And we're like, we're making fun of racists, and to me, I always thought like there was way more offensive stuff on that record, like "Kill Yourself" or "Premenstrual Princess Blues," or I mean, there was pick a song. Every song
Yeah,
was offensive, and that's I think the whole thing that people missed was, you know, I created this comic character, Sergeant D, and everything is done through his voice. That's it's not me saying these things. I was writing for this character who's dead and hates anything alive. He hates puppies.
yeah.
He hates he hates flowers. Like,
Yeah.
anything living.
Having
So,
a sense of humor in an audience is really important. And yeah, and look, like one of the things I think is really interesting is the link between like comic books and heavy metal. Like so many dudes we've had on this podcast and just people I've interviewed over the years have had like a love of comic books. What do you think's the connection? Is it fun to be scared and kind of yeah?
um, well,
Wait,
comics is
isn't scary.
comics
No, no.
are
Yeah.
one of the few, if not the only thing that kind of predates music in my life, because I started basically learning how to reading comics. And I was reading comics before I picked up a guitar. I was reading comics before I I was even into music. My parents played music in the house, but I didn't really care so much. I was way into comics already. 7 years old, just crazy comic book guy. So for me, they come even before I got into music. So that passion and that love was already there. And then along comes music, and I get, of course, head over heels in love with that as well. And the two always just worked so well together for me. They just kind of moved me in the same way. The music I was attracted to, music that back in the '70s, whether it was rock or hard rock, and then of course what was to become metal, thrash metal, and punk, hardcore, so on. Um, it all moves me in a certain way, and so did comics. I guess I was maybe I was always attracted to very aggressive, action-packed comic books. I was always attracted to horror books. I started reading horror at a very early age because my mom was a big horror fan. So we would watch movies when we were way too young, and then I started reading, books probably when I was too young to be reading those books. But I loved it. I loved it. Horror, comics, music, and you could throw sci-fi in there, I guess, as well to an extent. And all of that stuff all moved me the same way.
That's
It
it.
all it all made me happy in the same way. It put the same smile on my face.
Well, I think one of the great things about like comic books rather than like a movie and like books in general and heavy metal is you paint a world in your head listening to it. And that you kind of get to do that
Sure.
every time you get into it. Okay, I got a question for you. Who do you think is the biggest cartoon character in heavy metal? My personal thing would I'd like to see Brent Hines as the lead in a comic book.
Oh,
I
he's
think
so
he would
great.
be he's a larger than life character. I think I would really like to read a Brent
Sure.
Hines comic. But I'd be interested in your thoughts. Who deserves a comic? Who would belong as the lead?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, Brent, sure, he's amazing. He's yeah, the guy is never he's constantly cracking me up. Uh, yeah. Brent would be great. I'm trying to think who else. When they may already have something, but I certainly think the the Adventures of Clown and Sid would be an awesome comic book. Because
Definitely.
you'd have the darkness of Clown and then the the funness of Sid. um, I think they could make a great comic.
Yes.
Um, I'm trying to think if there's anyone else that immediately kind of jumps out at me. No, that's it for now.
Yeah.
But I love the Brent Hines idea.
Yeah, I want it to be real. I think yeah, there's some great characters in the world. So okay, Kiss. So Kiss are one of those bands that it's just absurd. We've had John Five's Kiss collection on this show. I don't know whether you've seen it, but it's
I
pretty
haven't seen the whole thing, but I know a lot about it. Let's put it that way.
it's pretty absurd. Like it's that's dedication. He's like, well, like I was on the road and I don't drink and I don't do drugs and I have a wife, so I had to do something. So I collected Kiss memorabilia. So I wanted to go back to like your first Kiss concert and I guess get a different perspective. Like what did it smell like? And
Wait,
what were the
just
people around you? Yeah.
back to John for 1 second. So
Yes.
when I was in Australia a few years back doing my talking shows, and John and I have the same guy, an Australian guy, Rohan from Melbourne, who he does all our web stuff, you know, and so Rohan was with me as my tour manager when I was in Australia doing my talking shows, and Rohan had another mission while he was there. John had bought this Kiss comb that was only available. There were these 4 promotional combs that they did. I think I'm getting this right. When Kiss played Australia in 1980, that first time they came to Australia, and there was these promo combs. John had the other 3. He needed the Gene still, and apparently the Gene was like the hardest one to find. These things are not cheap. Most people just threw them out. Whoever had got them, I think they were free back then. They just gave them out, and this is like a real hard item to get. So he located one, and when he found out Rohan was coming with me to Australia, he said, "I need you to like get the comb from this guy. I don't trust it being shipped. I'm afraid it'll get lost in the mail, whatever." And he had paid a lot of money for it. So Rohan gets the comb, and it's this stupid little plastic comb still in its packaging, like brand new. And I said, "Man, it would be so great." I said, "Let's take the comb out, stick it in my beard, and take a picture and say the comb is safe. I'm gonna keep it here for safekeeping till we get home in 2 weeks." And Rohan was like, "Fuck no, he would lose his mind. You can't take it out of the package,
Yeah.
you know."
It would be carnage,
So
dude.
we
Carnage.
didn't do it. We didn't do it, but I do remember texting him, and we were ball busting a little bit, saying like, "Dude, we can't find the comb." Like, and then we'd let him sweat for 5 minutes, and then
There's something I think there's something about them at that moment because and I don't know whether it was like there was nothing else around because I don't think people in the latter days of Kiss had the same relationship with that band. Whereas I think like something like Black Sabbath, people kept having the relationship. And I'm kind of it's kind of an interesting thing that moment in time was so like seismic and stuff.
yeah. I mean, my Kiss window
Hmm.
is from 75 to 78, and like everything they did from the first record through Alive 2 means as much to me today as it did in the 70s when I got that in my sweaty little teenage hands. And
Yeah.
you know and they were my favorite band in the world, and I lived and breathed Kiss, but like most things, you start to Kiss was my gateway. Kiss opened the door for so much other stuff.
Yeah.
Specifically, not long after getting into Kiss when I was 11, and like right after that is like I had heard of Black Sabbath, but I wasn't listening to Black Sabbath yet. But now Kiss kind of opened that door. Oh, Black Sabbath, and and so
Mm,
on and so on and so on. But yeah, 75 to 78 for me, it made such an impression.
mm,
It couldn't have been more perfect. Like I said earlier, music, horror, comic books, all wrapped up, in this package, and then
mm.
like mainlined right into your cerebral cortex as a 11 or 12-year-old. It couldn't have been more perfect. And of course, they knew what they were doing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and that's why it still means I'm 58 and I still feel the same way about that period of my life as I did then. It's like that's how strong it is.
I think keeping that love and fandom keeps you young, man. Just
Oh, for
I think
sure.
it does. Like keeping that love for and just doing what you love for a living and that kind of stuff just keeps you almost, yeah. Like people give up and you're still going, dude. And that's, and I have mad respect for everyone who keeps their dream going. So when you first started Anthrax, I guess what were you the biggest fan of at that moment? Like at that, and yeah. And we can talk about thrash too, but yeah.
Well, the band started in July of '81. I have to say my favorite bands in that moment were certainly Maiden, Priest, AC/DC, Sabbath, because Heaven and Hell had just come out in 1980. Motorhead, um, Scorpions,
Yeah.
uh, like Rainbow, the stuff with Dio, like off the top of my head, all of that certainly. Thin Lizzy,
Yeah.
that was definitely where I was at. If I had to really narrow it down, Maiden and Motorhead.
Yeah.
At that point in time, 1980, 1981 were really transformative years because so many records came out in 80, 81 that were game changers and changed music. Because of those records, thrash metal exists because of the records that came out in like 80 and 81. So obviously Maiden and Motorhead, for me, had such a huge impact on my life.
Well, you're the bastard American child of the new wave of British heavy metal.
Sure.
Thrash is the bastard child. Okay, what's the best thing you stole from Lemmy musically? You stole something.
Um,
What a
that's a
dude.
good. Well, we played, in the early days, even, we would fuck around with covering Motorhead songs in the rehearsal room all the time, and of course play them terribly, and always seemingly we would play like Ace of Spades and Overkill faster than Motorhead's versions because this is pre Charlie as our drummer, and whoever was drumming they just weren't very good with tempos, and we would play faster
Hmm.
than even Motorhead, and I think that has a lot to do with us becoming what we became when we started writing our own music because we just felt like, well, look, they play Overkill this fast, we play it even faster than Motorhead. Not that made us better than Motorhead,
Faster.
um,
Faster than
but that was the only way we could play
yeah.
it.
It's sick. What do you think
So
this?
I guess we stole.
Yeah.
If somehow that's what we stole from Motorhead, we tried to copy them, but we were nowhere good enough, and that's how we came to be a band.
But that's always that's silly. But that's always a good thing. We actually had a Motorhead concert here, where the bikies called a truce. Okay, this is alleged that apparently all the bikies called a truce for the night, all the rival bikie gangs, and they were all
Uh-huh.
it's just a bunch of like leathered up dudes just looking really happy. Lemmy brings the people together, which is
Oh
sorry,
yeah,
that's a
of
really
course.
random aside. What do you think? Okay, so thrash and the big four, like you obviously that's cool to be acknowledged, eh? Like it's nice.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
sure, of course.
What so you guys, obviously you and Metallica had this shared moment at this time, with Johnny Z and Megaforce in New York, and you lending them the fridge and the toaster and all of that kind of business, and listening to No Life to Leather. What, as you're obviously a fan, just even though they're your friends, you're a fan just as much as they are. What would a fan not know about those guys that you've had that relationship that we would love to know? Just maybe about them as people. Go on, I'm sure you know stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I don't know.
Sorry, that's kind of a
Back
big
then,
question.
back then in those early days, it was there were guys that were just like us. They
Yeah.
were when I first heard the No Life to Leather demo, and I was blown away by it, and I just immediately felt a kinship with guys I hadn't met yet, just based on the fact that I was like, wow, they sound like what we're trying to be, and they must listen to the same bands, and you know, um, because there was nothing going on in New York. We didn't have any fellow guys in other bands that there was no scene, and now suddenly there's a band from 2,700 miles away that we could obviously tell they're listening to the same music, and they're trying to do the same thing we are. So when they came to New York and we met, and of course we were fast friends, and then realized, well, I was correct in my thought, because we just immediately hit it off, and they were just a bunch of dudes just like us,
Yeah.
just loved music, loved comics, loved horror, loved, not all of them, but that was I was closest with Kirk and Cliff pretty much right on from when Kirk got there. Of course, Dave was there first. I got along with all of them, but I kind of gravitated probably more towards Cliff
Mm.
in the early days, just because he was into reading horror and
Mm.
stuff, and so we kind of had that to talk about outside of music and band stuff.
Yeah.
And then when Kirk came, he was even on more of a nerd level than I was, and yeah. So the three of us, that was kind of like a big connection for the three of us, is that
Yeah.
we were just like, I mean, how old were we? We were still teens, or
Mm.
maybe, or 20, and it was just so cool to find your brothers that you didn't even know you had.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people have an image or a picture in their mind, because the pictures from the magazines in the early days, and Alcoholica and all that, and of course, yeah, those guys partied, but that's not all it was.
Mm.
They were very much just kind of regular dudes who were just really, really good at writing riffs and being in a band together too.
Yeah, it's like in your book you're talking about like the moment with Cliff when Cliff passed away, and you kind of shared that moment with them. I guess what do you think Cliff brought to music that no one else did?
Well, he was the best musician out of all of us. Certainly, he knew more about music. He knew theory. He knew about melody. Like, he was just a much more accomplished musician than anyone else at that point. So that has so much to do with their growth as a band and songwriters. I think on those first three records, if you go from Kill 'Em All to Master of Puppets, and the leaps they were making, from Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning to Master. I think it's just Cliff's. It was Cliff's ability, and to when it came to arranging and putting their songs together. James may have been writing most of the riffs, but Cliff had this sensibility that nobody else had when it came to melody and harmony, and you just hear it. You hear it on those records,
Yeah.
especially Master of Puppets. The Master of Puppets record is Cliff's. Fingerprints are all over that thing.
Yeah. Well, that's something I didn't necessarily know, so you did answer the
Right.
question. So what about Anthrax?
What about
What's
it?
yeah, what about yeah, what's something that we wouldn't know about, like, and especially your relationship and what you fan out on together, like you and Charlie in particular?
everything I just said about Metallica, except we didn't drink. We were
Probably for the best, dude.
we were a bunch of Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
You know, Metallica used
Yeah.
to they used to make fun of us if like Lars saw me holding a beer, he'd be like, "Look out, Scott's getting crazy." Um, yeah, I don't know. Same thing, we were just a bunch of normal New York teenagers.
Yeah.
As whatever that is normal as you can be growing up in New York City in the 1970s, which to me seemed extremely normal.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I just think we were just a bunch of metal fans, a bunch of hard rock fans who had a had a dream that they were going to make come true no matter what.
Mm.
Somehow we took something that was non-tangible and we made it something that you could actually see and hear
Yeah.
and uh, you know I wish there was a secret. I wish I could start a website and sell that, but somehow we were a bunch of kids who didn't even know each other when we were all going to the same shows at Madison Square Garden,
Mm.
and through mutual friends we end up meeting each other and being in a band together, and you know and then taking that dream of wanting to do that with your life, because I mean, who doesn't want to be in a band,
Yeah.
grow up and do what your idols are doing, and somehow we made that happen,
Yeah. It's pretty sick. It's interesting. I was reading an interview. Well, actually, let's talk about thrash for a minute before I go down that path. Why do you think, like, what do you think was happening out in the world that made this like super fast, crazy music connect with people so much? Because that was like a moment, like thrash just exploded, right? What do you think there was
Yeah.
anything about like the world around you that made that this moment where it exploded?
Well, you had and I can only speak about the States, really,
Mm.
but I mean, it happened here and it happened in Europe, certainly
Mm.
in similar ways. But you know, you had a very strong and thriving punk rock scene here, and you had a very strong hardcore scene here in the early '80s, and especially in New York, Boston, D.C., L.A., San Francisco, Chicago. Um, but there wasn't a metal scene.
Mm.
But
Really?
when the Bay Area bands like when like Metallica and Exodus started making noise in the underground, and Slayer started making noise in the underground in LA, and we started making noise in the underground in New York and playing shows, and then Johnny Z started Megaforce, and and Brian started Metal Blade, and records started coming out, and so by '85 there was a very strong and thriving underground metal scene, right? And people were coming out to the shows, and clubs were packed with kids into this new, faster, harder, more aggressive sounding, feeling heavy metal music. This was like, okay, it's like Maiden, but not as, that maybe the guitar playing isn't as good. It's just more aggressive, or it's more metal sounding than the hardcore, or you know, but people were connecting with it, and I'll always point to this moment as the thing that really kicked the doors down was in 1986 when Metallica opened for Ozzy in the States, because Ozzy was cool enough to take that risk of, well, not just take another typical run of the mill big haired LA band out as an opener. He took Metallica, and he decided he would share his stage with Metallica all across America in arenas. So the first time any of this underground metal is going to be out in front of massive crowds every night. And I would say 70 to 80% of the people going to those Ozzy shows had no idea who Metallica was going in. But when they left the building that night, all of those people went out and bought all three records, Kill 'Em All, Ride, and Master. Uh, and that was the moment where it went from underground into the mainstream, because then all of those Ozzy fans became Metallica fans,
Mm.
and then they started looking for, well, what else is like this?
Mm.
And that's how. So by '87, when we started the Among the Living tour in '87, a club tour in May of '87. Playing anywhere from 400 to say 1,000 people size venues. And by the end of '87, in December, we were back out in the States playing from 5,000 to 10,000.
Sick.
It just, over that like year's time between '86 and '87, it just blew up. Just it's crazy how it happened. But I truly believe it was Metallica opening for Ozzy is what enabled it all to get as big as it did.
That's cool when you can kind of witness a moment. I guess a lot of, especially like the underground scene, even before it kind of exploded, had felt like a lot of ownership because these are their local bands getting big. Like
Sure.
they were there when there was 150 people in the room, and there's nothing quite like getting to watch your band blow up like that. And okay, random. Okay, we'll take a slight detour. So Chuck, I was listening to an interview with Chuck D recently, and he was talking about how at that moment in time he was watching like metal bands play these 3,000 a head shows, like 5 of them every weekend in New York, and it was just absolutely off the chain. He's like, I want that. They did okay. Rap worked out. But he was talking about designing the Public Enemy logo and how he referenced like the Anthrax logo and a lot of other stuff. And you guys were part of this cultural moment. Can you tell us a bit about your relationship? I know you were into rap earlier on, but like, how would you describe, kind of connecting with him as another person who's quite iconic in the genre? Yeah.
It was another one of those moments where I just knew we would be friends before we met. I just knew, just from listening to his records and his voice and the things he was saying in his music. I just knew we would be friends. They were like instantly my favorite band when I heard them on that first record, and and I was right. I guess I have a good sense of people I'm going to connect with. But yeah, and then when we, did meet through mutual friends who worked at Def Jam back then, we did become friends. And Chuck he grew up on Long Island, not far from where I lived in Queens. We were very much into all the same kind of stuff from the '70s, music-wise, and and he's also an artist on top of that. So, I had no idea I remember when he told me that one day. He said I would see like your logo and Iron Maiden's logo, and I always think like I need a Public Enemy. I want to brand Public Enemy like metal bands brand their logos, and it's killer on a T-shirt and all that. And I was like, wow, I had no idea. We were just meant to be.
It's true. Can you tell us about the day you made the Bring the Noise video? Because that's one of my favorite live videos ever. That's sick.
We were on the Clash of the Titans tour.
Yeah.
In the States. It was July of '91, and it was us and Slayer and Megadeth and Alice in Chains were the opening band, and we had a day off in Chicago before the Chicago date, and that was the one day we knew we could get this video done, and Chuck and Flav were available to fly into Chicago. So yeah, on that day off on the tour, we made that video happen, and what a day! Holy cow, that was. We were set up somewhere on the south side, down underneath these train tracks, and they had built that big stage, and they just kind of put it out there that Public Enemy and Anthrax were going to be, jamming, and people just started showing up, and it was an amazing day. And then it was in the van on the way back to the hotel after the shoot, like late that night. We were like, well, we made the record and we made a video now, and next thing we got to do is go play some shows. And Chuck just said, just tell me when and where. And that's literally how the tour came about. And phone calls were made over the next few days, and we had that Anthrax Public Enemy Primus tour booked for the fall of '91 going into '92. And so it just showed, that's how all the best stuff happens, is when you're just getting to work with your friends, and it's just organic in that way,
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. It should be a good time, you know. And people, I was talking to someone about like creative projects and stuff, and they were talking about how people don't necessarily invest in the movie or the song or anything like that. They invest in the person. and people will connect with
Sure.
the person more than anything else. And that's the actual thing that keeps it going and makes a fan on some level, even
Right.
if you don't know them, even if you constructed this whole idea of who they are in your head that's completely inaccurate. It's still
Right.
sometimes, yeah, it's cool like that. And okay, one thing, your musical Mount Rushmore, if you had four faces carved in the stone. And we're getting these built, man. I don't know why I think Dolly Parton's going to be one to do it, but I reckon she could buy like a big bunch of rock and we could just do this, like just the rock Mount Rushmore. And they don't have to be rock. Yeah, they don't have to be rock and roll.
So hard. Well, I'm just gonna go with the ones that just immediately
Mm.
pop in my head. Malcolm Young, Gene Simmons, Steve Harris, and oh, God,
That sounds,
Lemmy.
yeah,
Lemmy.
yeah. He would, with the thing.
Easy.
You have to like
And it's
get
funny. I got three bass players on there
yeah.
and a rhythm guitar player.
Mysterious.
Why are bass players so cool?
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things. Um, yeah, okay, we got to talk about AC/DC because they're obviously our proudest export. And I don't know whether you've seen Bon Scott's bastard child, Amy from Amyl and the Sniffers. That's his bust. You haven't heard Amyl and the Sniffers?
I've heard of the band, but
You should saw
I
some.
never heard of them.
They're a ridiculous punk band, and she is
Is it
100%.
actually his daughter?
No,
Oh,
absolutely not. No,
Oh,
absolutely
okay.
not. Just the best we've got, the follow on. But I highly
Got it.
recommend you suss them out
Got it.
because she's got the same lunatic energy. Let's talk
Did
about
they
Bon
did
Scott.
they open for the Foo Fighters?
Probably. Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they did. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
on, it's great. Dude, I saw them when they were playing clubs like 3 years ago and now they're, anyway, just getting proud about Australian things, not really about AC/DC, which what I'm actually trying to talk about. Yeah, can you tell us a bit about your relationship with the myth of Bon Scott? Because he's a myth and a legend to us.
I mean, they became my favorite band probably from. I mean, first time I heard them was probably '77. My buddy, a buddy named Zlatko, in junior high, he brought in the tape. He brought in "If You Want Blood," I think, or
Dude,
"Power." Probably "If You Want Blood," and so wait, was that even out yet by '77 or '70?
I'm
I can't remember.
I'm not that
Anyway,
good at chronology, man.
yeah, but I'm pretty sure it was the "If You Want Blood" live record, and we were listening to it at lunchtime, and I had never heard anyone sound like Bon. I'd never heard that voice before in my, I mean, I've gotten pretty deep into music and checking out bands by that point, and he didn't sound like anybody. I mean, just like, wow, I was like, I just had this picture of a pirate in my head. Like, I didn't know what he looked like or anything, and because the guy just had a cassette tape and this little boom box and no packaging, nothing. I had no idea what they looked like or anything. Then I started seeing pictures of them in the magazines, and yeah, I fell in love with AC/DC, and I mean, I'll give credit. Like, pretty much, it was AC/DC records and Sabbath records is how I play guitar. Because once I stopped taking lessons as a kid, I just used to put those records on and learn all the songs, and that's how I learned how to play. But yeah, they became my favorite band instantly. And the next record, uh, I I could have seen them on Highway to Hell at the Palladium in New York City, um, and I didn't get tickets because I didn't have money. I had already like spent my money on tickets for something else, which actually at the time I think was Cheap Trick, and I didn't have money, and I didn't go and beg my mom because I figured, well, they'll be back. And then, a few months later, Bond dies, and I was like, "Oh fuck,
Hey man,
what?"
we've all
And
been there. We've all I know.
yeah, and
I've been there, yeah.
but then and then a few months later, I'm in Florida in that summer of 1980, in Florida visiting my grandparents, and I've got the Back in Black tape, and it didn't leave my Walkman for a month. It's like the only record I listened to for a month.
On repeat.
I couldn't believe how good it was. Like, I was like, this is, so yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
but for me, AC/DC with Bon, it's very, and don't get me wrong, I love Brian, But AC/DC with Bon, that's my favorite band of all time. Everything they did,
Yeah, dude.
that to me, if I have to choose, if I have to pick,
Yeah.
that for me is that's the best. There's just
Yeah.
something about the chemistry of that band. It's the perfect rock band. It's the best version of rock and roll think that's ever existed.
Okay, as an Australian, I feel quite proud on our behalf, but it's funny. He's got that snarl. He's got that Australian. You know how we talk like this with a bit of a
Yeah,
snarl? He's got that snarl. I try aggressively not to,
he's
but
the
he's
best.
got that snarl, man. And those they were a force of nature. And I do have a theory that the only way anyone could have ever replaced him was doing a record as good as Back in Black. If he had done anything less than that, there would have
Yeah.
been absolutely no chance he could have ever filled his shoes. But dude did
Yeah, I
that.
mean, the songs on that record, it's undeniable. I mean, for me, the song "Back in Black" is the most. It's the best. It's the best rock groove ever played on an album. It's just undeniably perfect.
Yeah.
And when you hear the stories on how, Angus says like, yeah, Mal came in playing these three chords, bump, bada bump, bada bump. What do you think of that? And like, in anyone else's hands, it would have been like, who gives a shit? EAD. What the fuck is that? Or whatever. EDA. Sorry, I was backwards. But yeah. But in their hands, it becomes one of the best songs of all time, and that just shows you their genius.
Yeah, it's you just can't mess with them, and they don't come. And it's interesting, they never played festivals here because they were just like, we don't need a festival.
Right.
We're like, we got your stadium covered, we're fine. But I'm glad they came along because it's cool to anyway. I digress. Okay, your younger brother's Pantera. You had Diamond 3 Records. Your younger brothers,
Right.
okay, they came along. The next generation that saved the 90s.
Yes.
Tell us, so do you have any great Dime stories? Because everyone has great Dime stories.
I
Not
think
to
my
put the
head.
pressure on you. Yeah.
I had to move my head. It's hard to see there, but that's him behind me on the wall. Um, uh, yeah, I've got 1,000 of them, but they're all too long.
Yeah, we're almost done. Yeah.
I highly suggest to get my books and then
I,
but yeah,
I have read your
Dime,
book, but
Dime is
yeah.
Dime is everything. He's everything you wanted him to be, and more. Whether you were someone like me who was lucky enough to have known him for a really long time, we met in '86.
Whoa.
Pantera was opening for us at some club in Houston. We were nobody back then, and this is pre Phil Anselmo, of course. But yeah, that's when we first met. We went back that far, and so whether you're someone like me who knew him for a long time and got to spend even a lot of quiet time with him, and but but then at the same time, when he would walk off that tour bus, he he would give the people what they wanted. People. I think people have an expectation based on the albums and the home videos and who Darrell was and he was that guy, 100%. When he was out there, he would never let somebody down. Dime was truly just a one of a kind. I know that's so cliche to say that kind of stuff, but I didn't know anyone else like him
Yeah.
in my life. I never got to hang with Bon. I never got to hang with some of my heroes like that. Who maybe you would expect would have kind of been like that. I remember I once asked Ozzy because I knew Ozzy knew Bon,
Mm.
and I asked Ozzy. I said, "Well, what was he like?" What? And all Ozzy said was, "He's like, oh, Bon, he was a drinker." I was like, "Wow," Ozzy saying,
Yeah.
yeah, Ozzy saying someone else was a drinker. But yeah, Darrell was man, just he was just a great human. Really, just did everything for all the right reasons, you know, which was basically just if it put a smile on his face, that's all that mattered. Nothing,
Yeah.
nothing, all any of the trappings of being in a successful band or any of that crap, none of it mattered to him. Putting on that guitar, and whether it was 30 people or 30,000 people, it didn't matter to him. He was going to have the same, as he would say, he would catch the same nut on 30 people as he would for 30,000 people, because for him it was just all about getting to play guitar in his band and just how fucking great that was. And
Yeah.
yeah, he truly was that guy. You know, Vinny
Yeah.
too. The two brothers were just such amazing people.
Yeah. They always, yeah. I mean, Vinny always gave me the time of day over 10 years. We made a doco about him and when he died from YouTube. And it was really wonderful to kind of capture that because they have such a beautiful energy and what he did to kind of, and it to Vinny to keep that energy alive in their camp. Like after it happened, like you can tell
Sure.
he took that energy, and it's just great when wonderful people are, talented people are wonderful. It's sick. Like it's
Yeah, I mean, I you know, and of course, I love the fact that their legacy is, you know, they arguably, you know, Pantera's even bigger now, you know, because every week there's thousands of new kids who are going out and buying those records and buying the T-shirts and you know and because that's what it deserves. It's the impact they made on music, you know, between 90 and 2002 is there's no way to ever quantify that. The every band that exists, every metal or and all the subgenres of, you know, metal, whether it be deathcore and metalcore and so on and so on and so on, and all, you know, all these bands playing super extreme music, but they've got shredders, and that's all because of Pantera. It's all Darrell, and you know, there's 100 bands out there now making records and having huge success that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for what Pantera did in the 90s. And it's not like people are trying to hide that, because, you know, why would you? You know what I mean? If Darrell was your influence, you would want to wear that on your sleeve. And yeah, just they were just, man, what a shiny moment for music when, you
dude,
know, in the 90s when they were just ruling the world.
100%. Like, and I have to say, the Revolver YouTube audience, no one goes harder for Pantera than the Revolver YouTube audience. So shout out to everyone out there repping, you know, it's important. We all grew up on it and it's important.
Yeah.
Okay, final song, 5 songs that change your life. That I'm just putting you on the spot with, because I do that just
I'm
out of
looking around.
nowhere.
I'm looking
Yeah.
around
Oh
and
yeah, you got some things. Actually, yeah, and can I okay, before that, okay, think on that. Do you have any tattoos that are emblematic of something you're a big fan of?
well, yes.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
mean, obviously. Yeah.
Malcolm,
Yeah.
Angus. uh, let's see, what else do I have on this arm?
You're
On
not
the other.
messing Van Halen. No.
I got that AC that lightning bolt I got in Melbourne. Yeah, I got so many. I got Gene Simmons on my leg. Um, yeah, I got my black tooth for Darrell. Right, I
Sick.
don't know if you can see that
Yeah.
there.
That's
Of course,
sick.
Sergeant D. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much.
He's not,
Everything
yeah.
on me is generally something I'm a fan of.
Yeah.
Um,
It makes sense, dude. You don't really want stuff on your skin permanently that you don't look at and go, yeah.
well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. Yes,
Um,
5 songs.
5 songs that changed my life. I'm not going to try and do it chronologically because that makes it even more difficult, probably. But first, I'll say Overkill from Motorhead. That'll be my first one. That record came out in '79, but I don't think I heard it till 1980 because Ace of Spades was my first Motorhead record. And then I brought that home and couldn't fucking believe what I was hearing. And then, of course, went back to the record store the next day and found Overkill and then put that on and was like, Jesus fuck. Like, so, yeah, I think that Overkill song, that song just showed me. I was a big Ramones fan at that time already, and they were from Queens, where I was from. But yeah, Overkill really was kind of like a thing. Like wow, you could listen how fast they're playing, and the double kick drum, and the 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 aggressiveness of Lemmy's voice, and the aggressiveness of the whole thing. It was just so. It couldn't have been more like it was like they wrote that song for me. Like they were like they knew what I needed to hear, um, especially moving forward as far as the kind of music I wanted to play.
Mm.
So I'll say Overkill. I guess I got to go with. I'm trying to pick an
I know
ACDC
it's
song.
yeah, it's hard.
Jesus.
This
Well,
is a tricky one.
my favorite ACDC song is Down Payment Blues. So I'll go with that one. I could name any one off any Bond record, or even off Back in Black probably. Uh, but for some reason, Down Payment Blues is my favorite one. I don't know if it's because of the story he tells in the lyrics, the guitar tone, the arrangement of the song, everything. Just for me, it just that's the one for
Yeah.
me. It makes me bang my head the hardest. I don't know what it is. Riff Raff 2.
Mm.
Riff Raff would be my second favorite AC/DC song. But yeah, I'll say Down Payment Blues, just because they fucking rule.
Yeah.
What else can I say?
I support you in
Um, yeah, I'll go with the song "Killers" from Maiden from the album. No, 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 because I was I got the first Maiden record when it came out, and and I was gonna say Prowler because it was the first song on the album, and I fucking kicked in, and again it was like, what the fuck am I hearing? Um, but maybe I'll go with Phantom of the Opera off that record,
yeah, sick.
just because yeah, in 1980 nothing sounded like that. It was crazy. What a crazy song. I didn't know what prog was at that point in time, but you know, it was some of the heaviest shit I ever heard. Some like difficult degree of difficulty in the guitar riffs I had never heard before, and with an edge, with a even though Steve Harris always disagrees with this, but it felt like punk at the it was like punk and prog at the same time, which I like. How do you make that work? Well, Maiden did, you know. Maiden made that work, and
Yeah.
like holy shit, you know, it was like Rush on, like it was like the sharper, meaner version of Rush, and who I were
Yeah.
also a big fan of, and yeah, and they had, you know, Eddie on the cover, and um, yeah, I mean Maiden was my favorite band for years from that point on. So I'll go with Phantom of the Opera because somehow they were able to make punk and prog work.
Yeah, totally. Yay.
Maybe is that really what metal is? Is it punk plus prog equals metal? Is that
Maybe it
is that
actually
the formula?
maybe it actually does. Maybe you've
I
cracked
mean,
the code.
Maiden, but not many bands do that. Maiden did it, and
Yeah.
they did it in 1980,
You cracked
and
our code.
even
Yeah.
earlier when you figure they had written and were playing those songs in '79, you know, so it's crazy to think they were doing that then. And then, you know, I got to go with a Priest song because
Yay.
Priest for me were the band. Priest were the band for me that, and then I'll go Sabbath. And does that make five? I'm not
It
sure.
does. That's 5 songs. You have
Okay,
shared
so
your yeah.
Priest were the band for me. Like I love Black Sabbath,
Mm.
and then when I heard Judas Priest, it was kind of like, well, they've cut most of the blues out of this.
Oh,
So
that's
what does this
yeah.
sound like? What is this sound now? With like, it's different. It's
Mm.
metal, and like for me, Priest was the first metal band. I know a lot of people argue that it's Sabbath or Zeppelin, or and of course a lot of the riffs. Yes, they were certainly, especially Sabbath. I mean,
Yeah, of
I
course.
could argue that Sabbath are the first metal band too, but but for me, if I really, really, really analyze it, I feel like Priests were the first. The two guitars, you
Hmm.
know, uh, all the harmony stuff they were doing. Um, the Thin Lizzy were of course more blues based and rock based, whereas Priest it was just like, we're gonna lose the blues. This is
That's,
something
dude, I've
different.
never heard that anyone talk about it like that, and it's bang on. Yeah. They don't have no
So,
blues.
and the song I'm gonna pick is
Yeah.
uh, I'll say "Victim of Changes." Fuck it.
Yeah.
From Sad Wings of Destiny. I mean, I know that's kind of a popular, obvious one, but
Do it.
still to this day, I mean, when you think about when did that song come out, it was like 77 or 70, 76 even maybe.
Yeah.
They were playing that then.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus, nothing sounded like that.
Mm.
They there's always that positive of being completely original and being able to say, well, we don't sound like anyone else, but at the same time, it's like, and then because people are like, what the fuck is that? But for me and my friends, it was what the fuck is that in the best way? Like, oh my God, listen to that.
Yeah,
So,
you're a teenager in the goddamn golden age, my friend. An absolute golden age. No, you can't actually touch that. You can't, and no one can ever take it away. So, good
and
on
then
you.
and then of course I have to go with Sabbath because I heard the song Black Sabbath off the album Black Sabbath when I was young. I was probably like 8 or 9 at my uncle's house. My uncle was 10 years older than me, and I flipped through his records and I saw that album cover and it looked scary. And I asked him, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, Black Sabbath. That's acid rock."
Yes.
that's what that's what he called it. And I'm sitting in his room and he's got black lights on and all his weird black light posters and we put that on and it starts with the rain and the thunder and then the riff kicks in with the tritone and I gotta admit I was a little scared and at the same time I wanted more and yeah, that one absolutely changed my life because you could basically, even though I had it was Kiss was more the thing that really opened the door for me, but Sabbath initially informed me in that early moment of my life of like, wow, heavy guitars are cool.
I
This
think
sounds like a horror movie on an album,
yeah,
you know.
I'm scared, but I wanted more is like a banging way to end the show. That's sick. That's
Cool.
a good way to go out. The first Black Sabbath album, that's rounded it out real nice. So thank you, Scott Ian, for joining us. It's
Oh,
been
you're
been
welcome.
a delight, and may the dark forces be with you. And thanks
Thanks.
everyone for watching.